During the divorce, my husband said, "Return everything I ever gave you and the kids." A week later, welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
It all began on an ordinary morning, the kind that makes you think life is simple and predictable. I was sipping my coffee, my kids laughing at breakfast, the sunlight spilling through the window, and I could almost forget the tension that had been quietly building in my marriage. For months, we had been drifting apart, small fights turning into cold silences, words left unsaid, feelings left unshared. I had tried to hold it all together, to keep the house, the children, and myself intact. But deep down, I knew something was shifting, something I couldn't control. I never imagined that day would mark the beginning of one of the most shocking and painful weeks of my life. He walked in, his face tight, his eyes colder than I had ever seen. He didn't greet the kids, didn't smile, didn't ask how I was. He only looked at me, and I could feel a tension slicing the room in two. Then, in the most casual, yet cutting way, he said it, the words bouncing in my head like a hammer. "Return everything I ever gave you and the kids." I froze, unable to process the full weight of what he had just said. Everything, the car, the furniture, the savings, the little things that had meant security, that had meant comfort, that had meant home. He wanted it all back. And just like that, my world tilted, the floor beneath me threatening to give way. I watched the kids, too young to understand the chaos, quietly waiting in the wings, unaware that a week would soon turn everything upside down. Their laughter felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. And I suddenly felt the raw vulnerability of being responsible for their safety and happiness. I wanted to scream, to beg, to cry, but I forced myself to breathe, to hold my composure, to find a plan. But inside, panic coiled like a snake, ready to strike. I knew that this wasn't just about material things. It was about control, about power, about trying to erase the life I had built with them. The next hours blurred together, a strange mixture of shock and planning. I spent the morning checking accounts, listing what might be demanded, mentally preparing for confrontations I wasn't sure I could face. Every time I looked at him, I saw the same cold certainty, the same silent threat lingering behind his gaze. I realized, painfully, that in that moment I was not just fighting for possessions. I was fighting for dignity, for stability, for my children, for the life I had worked tirelessly to create. I had never felt so small, yet so determined. Then came the calls, the lawyers, the threats, thinly veiled as negotiations. Every conversation felt like a landmine, every question, a test of my ability to survive the storm. I would sit with the kids at the table, trying to maintain normalcy, while in my mind I replayed every memory, every decision, wondering where I had failed and what could be done. The fear was constant, gnawing at me, yet beneath it, a small ember of defiance began to glow. I could not let this break me. I would not let it. But even as I tried to stay calm, even as I kept the children laughing and eating, I felt the pressure building, a tension that no one outside my home could understand. Friends offered sympathy, strangers offered advice, but the weight remained on my shoulders, pressing down, reminding me that life as I knew it was being ripped apart, piece by piece. I imagined what it would be like if I lost everything, if my children's home became unsteady, if the small safety net I had built crumbled beneath me. The thought made my chest tighten, my stomach churn, but also sparked something stronger, a will to fight, to survive, to reclaim some sense of power in a situation that seemed completely out of control. That evening, as I tucked the children into bed, I forced a smile, hiding the storm inside me. Their eyes were trusting, innocent, oblivious to the battles raging around them. I kissed their foreheads and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, promising safety, love, and stability, even as my own heart quivered with fear. When I closed the door, the quiet of the empty house pressed down on me. I sank into the sofa, thinking about the week ahead, about the steps I would have to take, about the courage I would need just to survive each day. Sleep didn't come easily. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every creak of the floor a reminder of what could go wrong. I lay awake, heart racing, mind spinning through scenarios I wasn't ready to face but knew I had to. A week stretched before me, a week that felt like an eternity, a week that I knew would either break me or transform me in ways I couldn't yet understand. I thought about my parents, my friends, the life I had once dreamed of. And I realized that this wasn't just about reclaiming possessions, it was about reclaiming myself, about proving that even in the darkest, most shocking moments, I could find strength I didn't know I had. And so, the first day ended, not with relief, not with hope, but with a quiet determination. The fear was still there, thick and unyielding, but so was the fire. I told myself, again and again, that I would face this week with everything I had. Little did I know, the days ahead would push me further than I had ever been pushed before, forcing choices, emotions, and actions that would leave scars, memories, and lessons I would carry forever. I had no idea what exactly would happen next, but I knew one thing: life had shifted irreversibly, and there was no turning back. The morning after that first shocking day arrived too quickly, bringing with it a strange, heavy silence. The kids were still sleeping, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, thinking maybe, just maybe, things could settle down. But the quiet was deceptive. I could feel the tension in the air, the kind that presses down on your chest without mercy. Every sound seemed louder, sharper, more menacing. I knew this week would be like walking on a tightrope stretched over a bottomless pit, and one misstep could shatter everything. I tried to start my day normally, making breakfast, checking homework, and packing lunches, but my mind was elsewhere. Every detail reminded me of him, of the words he had spoken, of the coldness in his tone. Return everything I ever gave you, and the kids. The words replayed in a loop, each repetition digging deeper into my chest, each echo making my heart pound harder. I had to keep it together for the children, to keep our life from collapsing in front of them. But inside, I was trembling. I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down like a mountain dot. By mid-morning, the first messages came. He wasn't waiting politely. He wanted everything immediately. Legal threats, subtle accusations, the quiet but undeniable pressure of someone trying to strip your life apart. I read his words over and over, trying to imagine how someone could be so cold, so determined to take everything. And yet, I also felt something else, a spark, small but fierce. This wasn't just about possessions. It was about him trying to control me, to assert power over my life, and I would not let that happen. I had to act, to plan, to prepare for the storm I knew was coming. I spent the day moving between phone calls and emails, trying to keep a balance between legal advice and emotional stability. Each conversation drained me. Each decision left me feeling raw and exposed. I could feel the clock ticking, the week shortening, and the pressure increasing. The thought of losing the things I had worked for, of seeing my children's stability threatened, made my stomach twist in knots. Yet, even in the fear, I felt a strange clarity. I could not control him, I could not control what he demanded, but I could control how I responded. That realization, small and quiet, became the anchor that kept me from sinking completely. By late afternoon, I had to go out, and the world seemed suddenly sharper, harsher. Every glance felt like a judgment, every interaction a test. I could see the tension in other people, even if they didn't know it, and it mirrored my own inner storm. I tried to focus on errands, on routines, but everything felt tainted with the knowledge that at any moment, the ground beneath me could shift. I felt the weight of every choice, every word, every action. It was as if life had slowed down just enough to make every second a trial. That night, I returned home to the kids, their laughter a fragile reminder of why I had to keep fighting. I watched them play, thinking about how unfair this was, how life could be so cruel. Yet I also felt a flicker of hope. If I could survive this, if I could protect them, then maybe I could find strength I didn't know I had. I began to see that this week, this struggle, would reveal not just who I was, but who I could become when faced with the unimaginable. The next few days were a blur of meetings, arguments, and planning. Each morning brought a new demand, a new twist in the storm. Every time I thought I could catch my breath, something else happened, a message, a reminder, a confrontation that forced me back to the edge. I started documenting everything, taking notes, making lists, tracking every item, every word, every interaction. I became hyper-aware, almost obsessive, knowing that one misstep could cost me more than just belongings. It could cost me peace, security, and the fragile sense of normalcy I was clinging to for my children's sake. And then came the moment I had been dreading. He showed up, unannounced, standing at the doorway like a shadow I couldn't ignore. The kids froze, unsure what to do, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. I felt my pulse quicken, my palms sweat, and a wave of dread roll over me. This was the confrontation I had been anticipating. The one that would test everything I had planned, every ounce of courage I had gathered. I could feel the weight of his presence, his eyes scanning the room, assessing, judging, measuring my reaction. I kept my voice calm, careful, even as my heart threatened to betray me. I watched him, measured my words, prepared for the worst, but also for the possibility that I could turn this moment into something that gave me control, even if only a little. The kids clung to me silently, their trust in me palpable, and I realized that more than anything else, this confrontation was about protecting them, keeping them safe, keeping our life intact. Everything else, the furniture, the money, the possessions, was secondary. The tension in the room was unbearable. A silent battle fought with eyes, gestures, and barely contained emotions. Every second stretched into eternity, every breath a challenge. And then, just when it seemed like the pressure would crush me, something shifted. A word, a hesitation, a flicker of something human behind his cold mask. I seized the moment, spoke firmly yet carefully, asserting what I could, drawing boundaries, claiming space I had almost forgotten I owned. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was the first victory I had felt in days. By the time he left, I was trembling, exhausted, and yet alive in a way I hadn't felt before. The kids were safe, the home still ours, and though the battle wasn't over, I knew that I had begun to reclaim control, reclaim power, reclaim a sense of dignity I had feared lost. That night, I sat alone, reflecting on what had just happened, on the choices I had made, on the fear I had faced, and on the strengths I hadn't realized I possessed. The week was far from over, but for the first time, I felt a spark of hope, a tiny flame that whispered that even in the most shocking and overwhelming moments, survival was possible, courage was possible, and life could still be rebuilt from the pieces scattered by someone else's cruelty. I had faced the first wave of chaos, and though the sea ahead promised more storms, I had learned that I could navigate it, one choice, one breath, one moment at a time. The following days felt like living in a storm with no shelter, each hour bringing a new wave of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. I woke up to messages demanding things I had thought were mine by right. Reminders of every debt, every gift, every shared memory turned into ammunition. My hands shook as I read each note, but I forced myself to breathe, to organize, to strategize, because I knew panic would only make things worse. Every decision mattered. Every word I spoke could tip the balance in ways I couldn't yet predict. I had no idea just how much a single week could stretch me, challenge me, and push me to my limits. I spent hours reviewing documents, making lists of items, and planning how to respond. But even as I tried to focus on the practical, my heart ached with every memory, every reminder of what this man wanted to take from us. It wasn't just about the material things anymore. It was about control, dominance, the sense that someone could try to erase all that I had built, all that I had nurtured for the sake of my children. I felt rage simmering beneath the surface, anger at the injustice, at the cruelty, at the sheer audacity of someone trying to rewrite history as if my life, my effort, meant nothing. And then, the threats became real. He called at odd hours, appearing unannounced, sometimes lingering near the house, watching us with a gaze that was impossible to ignore. The children noticed, too. Their questions pierced me, their confusion and fear amplified my own. I had to be strong, calm, reassuring, even as my pulse pounded and my hands ached with tension. Every time I looked at them, I realized that they were counting on me not just for safety but for courage, for guidance, for hope. I couldn't fail them. One afternoon, a neighbor approached, whispering a warning I hadn't expected. She had seen him in the driveway, pacing, waiting. "He's not backing down," she said. Those words echoed in my mind, a drumbeat of dread. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with petty disagreements or minor disputes. This was calculated, deliberate, a test of how much I could endure, and how far I could be pushed. The thought terrified me, but also sparked something fierce. If he wanted a battle, he would get one, but he wouldn't break me. Every day became a careful balancing act. I had to maintain routines for the children, manage my work, and navigate the legal landscape that felt like a minefield. Even small trips to the store were fraught with tension. Every glance from a passerby, every unfamiliar car in the driveway, every knock at the door sent my mind racing. I could feel fear twisting in my stomach, threatening to consume me. But I clung to the tiniest slivers of control I could find. I reminded myself constantly, Survival wasn't just about avoiding loss. It was about standing firm, protecting what mattered, and refusing to be crushed under the weight of someone else's cruelty. And then, the moment came that would change everything. He arrived at our home, unannounced, furious, his demands escalating into yelling, his eyes burning with rage. The children froze in terror, clutching my legs as though I could shield them from the storm. My own heart raced, my mind spun with calculations, strategies, prayers. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, each second stretching longer than the last. This confrontation was no longer just a challenge. It was the battlefield where the week's tension reached its peak. I tried to reason with him, carefully choosing words, trying to find a way to calm the situation. But his anger was relentless, fueled by a sense of entitlement and vindictiveness I hadn't fully comprehended until that moment. Every sentence he spat felt like a blow, every glare like a threat, every step forward a warning. I could see the truth in his eyes. He wanted power, control, domination. He wanted to erase me, to erase the life I had fought to build for myself and my children. And yet, even as the fear threatened to paralyze me, I felt the ember of defiance grow hotter. I refused to give in. I stood my ground, my voice steady though my body trembled. I reminded him that this wasn't just a battle over things. It was a fight for dignity, for stability, for the children who depended on me. Every second felt like a war, a test of will and endurance. The shouting, the threats, the reject, all collided in a chaotic storm. But within me, a quiet clarity emerged. I couldn't change him, couldn't control his anger, but I could control my response. I could choose courage over fear, strength over despair, hope over helplessness. Hours passed like minutes. The tension stretched on, an almost unbearable weight pressing down on all of us. And then, in a small, almost imperceptible moment, I sensed a shift. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps it was the realization that I would not be intimidated. But something in his stance softened ever so slightly. I seized that fraction of an opportunity to assert boundaries, to reclaim space, to declare, without aggression, that we would not be ruled by fear. The children clung to me, their trust and faith fueling my courage, reminding me that this wasn't just about me anymore, it was about them, our life, our right to exist without terror. When he finally left, I sank to the floor, trembling, exhausted, but alive. The house was quiet once more, but it was a silence heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. I had faced the peak of the storm, and though the threat hadn't vanished, though the battle wasn't over, I had survived. I had protected my children, stood firm, and discovered a strength I hadn't known existed. The fear remained, yes, but it was tempered now with resolve, with clarity, with the knowledge that even the darkest moments could be faced, endured, and survived. That night, I sat by the window, the children asleep, the house finally quiet. I thought about the week, about the battles fought, about the emotional exhaustion and raw intensity of living on edge, and I realized that this experience, as shocking and painful as it was, had revealed something essential. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing fear, standing firm, and refusing to let injustice dictate your life. I understood then that no matter how powerful someone else's threats may seem, they could not extinguish the resilience, love, and determination within me. As I drifted into a fitful sleep, I thought about the days ahead, the challenges yet to come, the twists I couldn't predict. I didn't know exactly what the next moments would bring, but I knew one thing: I would meet them head on, with everything I had, because life had already shown me that I could endure, that I could fight, and that I could protect what mattered most. And that realization, fragile but unyielding, carried me through the night, a spark of hope in the midst of one of the most shocking weeks of my life. By the fourth day, the tension had become unbearable, like a storm cloud hanging permanently over our heads. I could feel it pressing down on every corner of our home, seeping into my thoughts, twisting every plan, every breath into a tight knot of anxiety. The children were more aware now, asking questions I couldn't fully answer, sensing the cold weight of fear I was carrying. Their small hands clung to mine, seeking reassurance, trusting me to shield them from a world that suddenly felt cruel and unpredictable. And I couldn't fail them, not now, not ever. That evening, everything escalated. He arrived without warning, slamming the door behind him with a force that made the walls shiver. The children froze, their wide eyes mirroring my own terror. I could feel the cold, sharp edge of anger radiating from him, a palpable energy that made every instinct scream for caution. My heart pounded, my pulse raced, and my stomach twisted with dread. This was the confrontation I had feared, the moment when months of tension, weeks of quiet anxiety, and days of relentless threats collided. He didn't waste words. His demands rang out sharply, cutting through the room like knives. "Return everything," he shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls, each syllable filled with rage and entitlement. The furniture, the car, the savings, even small, sentimental items, he wanted it all. The kids clung to my legs, their tiny hands digging into my skin, and I realized that in that instant, I had no choice but to be both protector and warrior. Every ounce of fear I felt had to be transformed into courage. I faced him, steadying my shaking hands, trying to keep my voice calm, though my chest heaved. "This isn't just about things," I said, my words deliberate, every syllable a shield against his fury. "It's about us, about the children, about life. I won't let fear control us. I won't let you erase what we've built." The silence that followed felt endless, every heartbeat stretching into an eternity. The room heavy with anticipation and tension. He stepped closer, eyes burning with anger and disbelief. "You have no right," he spat. "Everything is mine. Everything." The threat wasn't just in his words, it was in his presence, in the way he moved, in the unrelenting force of someone who believed the world owed them control over another person's life. I could feel the fear curling in my stomach, but I pushed it down, grounding myself in the reality that I had survived this long, and survival had a rhythm, a method, a strength I hadn't yet tapped fully. Time seemed to slow. Every movement, every breath, every glance carried weight. The children were silent, watching, trusting me to navigate this moment. I could feel their eyes on me, their hope anchoring me, and in that unbearable tension, a strange clarity emerged. I realized that courage wasn't about being fearless. Courage was about standing firm, about making decisions even when your heart is pounding, even when every instinct screams to run or collapse. I had to act, and I had to act now. I spoke again, my voice firmer this time, a mixture of defiance and reason. "We won't be ruled by fear. You can threaten, demand, and yell, but our lives, our children, and our dignity are not yours to take. If you want to fight, then this is where it ends. But I will not surrender who we are or what we need to survive." The words seemed to hang in the air, solid and unyielding, like a wall against his aggression. I could see a flicker of something in his expression, a hesitation, a crack in the armor of his rage. For a moment, everything paused. The room was heavy with unspoken tension, the air thick with emotions too intense to name. My mind raced through every possibility, every escape, every strategy I had planned over the past week. The fear was still there, coiled tightly, but beneath it, a fierce determination burned. I could feel the shift, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. This confrontation, which I had feared would break me, was instead showing me a depth of strength I hadn't realized existed. And then, the unthinkable happened. He reached for something that could have changed everything in an instant, but I reacted instinctively, moving between him and the children, my voice rising, commanding, urgent. "Stop," I shouted, the single word carrying every ounce of fear, every shred of courage, every fragment of determination I could summon. The room froze again, the world narrowing to that single moment, that single act of defiance. My heart hammered, but I refused to flinch. The kids were behind me, their trust in me a lifeline I couldn't let go. Time slowed further, the seconds stretching, until he finally stopped. The tension didn't dissolve, it lingered, thick and suffocating, but the immediate danger passed. The silence that followed was electric, a fragile acknowledgement of boundaries, of power, of resistance. I realized then that this was not the end, but it was a turning point. I had faced the height of his rage, the peak of the storm, and I had survived, unbroken, with my children safe, with my dignity intact. By the time he left, the house felt different, though the echoes of fear still lingered. I sank to the floor, trembling, exhausted, and yet exhilarated in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had confronted the worst, faced the sharpest edge of cruelty, and discovered that even in the most shocking, overwhelming moments, there was room for courage, for action, for protection. The children hugged me tightly, sensing relief, sensing that the danger had passed for now, and I held them close, feeling a mix of terror and triumph swirling together. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every word, every breath. I thought about the intensity, the fear, the sheer rawness of the confrontation. I understood something crucial. Life could be unbearably cruel, but within that cruelty, strength could emerge. I had faced the peak of injustice, the apex of fear, and had survived. The spark that had begun in the first days of shock now blazed more brightly, a reminder that even the darkest moments could reveal inner power, resilience, and courage I hadn't known I possessed. And so, as the night stretched on, I allowed myself a single thought. The battle had reached its climax, but it was not just about surviving the storm. It was about understanding, about growth, about reclaiming agency in a world that so often tries to take it from you. I had faced the edge of fear, stared down the storm, and emerged with something precious. Knowledge that courage could carry us through even the most shocking, most emotional, most harrowing moments of life. When the door finally closed behind him for the last time that week, I felt the house exhale with me, as if it, too, had been holding its breath through the chaos. The silence was different now, not heavy and threatening, but fragile and tentative, a quiet reminder that we had survived something immense. The children peeked out from their rooms, their eyes wide but trusting, sensing that the storm had passed, at least for now. I gathered them into my arms, holding them tightly, feeling the steady rhythm of their hearts against mine. In that moment, I understood the full weight of what we had endured, not just the threats, the anger, the fear, but the courage it had taken to face it all together. The days that followed were not easy. The legal documents, the lingering messages, the quiet reminders of what had almost been taken from us were still there, but they no longer had the same power. I approached each obstacle with a calm I hadn't known existed before, a clarity forged in the fires of fear and desperation. I had faced the edge of helplessness and had refused to fall. Each decision, each action, became a declaration that our lives would not be dictated by cruelty or intimidation. The children watched me, learning, absorbing, and in their eyes I saw hope, a reflection of the strength I had discovered within myself. I began to reflect on the week, on the moments when I had felt small, powerless, and terrified. Each instance had been an opportunity, though I hadn't realized it at the time. The fear that had threatened to paralyze me had been transformed into action, into resilience, into a determination to protect what mattered most. I thought about the countless others facing similar storms, mothers, fathers, children, anyone trapped in situations where injustice and cruelty seem overwhelming, and I realized that our story, though personal and shocking, was also universal. It was a story of survival, courage, and the refusal to surrender to fear. As I watched the children play in the quiet of our home, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of gratitude. Gratitude not for what we had survived, but for what we had learned. I had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. I had learned that even when life seems intent on breaking you, there is always a way to reclaim strength, dignity, and control. I had learned that love for your children, for yourself, for life is the most powerful shield of all. Yet, I also knew the scars would remain, memories of the fear, the shouting, the threats would linger in the corners of my mind. I would carry them as reminders of the strength it took to endure, the clarity it took to act, and the courage it took to protect those who depended on me. Life would never be the same, not entirely, but perhaps that was the point. Change, even when painful, has the power to shape us, to teach us, to show us depths of resilience we might never have known existed. I thought about the choices I had made, the moments when panic threatened to take over, and the tiny sparks of defiance that had pushed me forward. Each of them had mattered. Each had built the path from fear to strength. And as I sat in the quiet of that evening, I realized that survival wasn't just about enduring the storm, it was about what you carry with you afterward. It was about lessons learned, courage discovered, and a determination to protect and nurture life, no matter the obstacles. The week that had begun with a single, shocking demand returned everything I ever gave you, and the kids ended with something far more profound. It ended with understanding, with clarity, with the realization that even in moments of utter chaos, you have the power to shape the outcome, to protect what matters most, and to emerge stronger than you were before. I had faced the apex of fear, the peak of tension, and had discovered an inner strength that I knew would carry me and my children through anything life might throw at us in the future. And yet, the story does not end simply with survival. It is also a reminder of the injustices that exist quietly in so many homes, the subtle cruelties, the manipulations, the threats that test courage and resilience daily. It is a reminder that these battles are not always visible, that those who face them often do so alone, And that strength is found in determination, love, and the refusal to surrender. I hope that by sharing my story, others can find inspiration, encouragement, and a spark of courage to face their own challenges. As I looked at the children sleeping peacefully that night, I asked myself a question that would linger long after the fear had faded. How many people go through moments like ours without finding the courage to survive? How many remain trapped by fear, by intimidation, by injustice, because they cannot see the strength that already lies within them? Our story was shocking, painful, and unforgettable, but it also carried hope. It carried proof that fear, no matter how overwhelming, can be met with courage, and that life, though unpredictable and sometimes cruel, can also reveal the deepest reservoirs of resilience we never knew existed. In the end, I realized that survival is just the beginning. The true victory lies in learning, growing, and emerging stronger, wiser, and more determined. It lies in protecting what is most precious and refusing to allow cruelty, injustice, or fear to dictate your life. Our week of chaos had ended, but the lessons, the strength, and the courage would remain with us forever. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges awaited, we could face them together with hope, with courage, and with the unwavering knowledge that even in the darkest moments, light, love, and resilience can prevail.